All right, we're back. It's COMP228. It's week 6, lesson 6, part 1. We're doing the broadcast as well as the recording. And again, I'll be putting the recording up later on alongside the broadcast. And that's what I'll be doing probably every week. It'll be a little bit of a delay. So you'll see the broadcast come up first and the recording will come up afterwards. And the recording will be higher quality. Well, so I'm trying to aim for 720p, if not something like that, which is much better recording quality, and you'll hear my voice. There won't be a weird slurring that you get sometimes with the internet and stuff like that. But on the downside, I mean, you'll have to deal with the recording for now. At least you have something to watch, especially when you're studying, so that you have something to go on before the better quality recording comes up. So let's talk about that exam again, and let's go over the, for some reason or another, people keep thinking about you know, the schedule hasn't really changed. Remember, I just made a minor change to the schedule from an outline perspective. So let's talk a little bit of administration again, right? So just so we're clear, right? So we've covered so far Java, you know, kind of an intro to Java, chapter 1 and 2 and 3, and we had our test, let's say up to chapter 6 and 7. We covered up to our test, which was held in week 4, right? That was a week before the break time, or whatever, 2 weeks before the break. And then what I did was I covered inheritance and polymorphism on 1 week. So that would be week 5. So last week before you guys went away, inheritance and polymorphism. So, and we're going to cover like an intro to UI, you know, today, pretty much. Again, this is covering chapter 12. But if you notice, chapter 12 is really being covered in week 8 as well. You notice it's 2 weeks. Well, we're not week 7 right now, we're week 6, right? So I'm covering UI today, this week, plus next week you're going to have your exam, your test, right? Where I'm going to get you to do a hands-on as well as some true, false, multiple choice. I'm probably gonna, I'm trying to decide which day it's gonna be on. I'll let you guys know later on tonight which day, if I do an exam or if I split it over 2 days. But they're gonna be both components, so both a written and a hands-on, right? That's what's gonna happen next week. So, I mean, in terms of our pace, still, if you notice, week 7, today's not week 7, today's week 6 officially in our calendar. Last week was, we had reading week, which is 7, right? It was not week 6. Today is week 6, right? So that's why it doesn't make any sense. If you guys are asking for when the exam is happening, it's happening next week as for our schedule. That's not changing. The only thing I've added is another little test in week 4, which we've already done, just to break out so that the exam isn't so crazy, right, in terms of weight. I'm going to probably do it again, probably around week 10, right, something like that, or week 11. I might have another little test, so that way by the time we get to week 14, which is the last week of class, where you do your final exam, it's not as crazy. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to break it out for you to make it easier. We've already done assignments 1 and 2. Those are done, and most of you hand that in. If you haven't handed it in, haven't marked anything, so if there's still a chance, I'll still, you know, accept them, and you'll get at least part marks instead of 0. Right? So please, if you hadn't handed in your stuff, make sure you get it in there so I can give you some marks. I can't mark what I don't have, and I've talked about this before, so please do that. So when we get into the next assignment, and if you notice, it says that assignment 3 is kind of billed for week 8. Now, I'm probably going to make it due week 8, which means sometime tonight I'll probably give you assignment 3 if possible. I'd like to try and do that. It's probably going to contain some kind of basic UI components. All right, I'm not going to ask you to do too much. More or less, it's just going to be an outlet for us to display our data, right? So instead of doing it on the console, we'll use a UI, all right? So that's the difference with assignment 3. And I guess I'm not sure if it's going to be due week 8 right now because week 7 is our exam, and then week 8, or it might be due week 9. I'm not sure yet where it's going to be due, but around you know, week 8 we do, I'll give you more details as to when it is. Okay, so that's really it in a nutshell. Assignment 4, which is kind of our second last assignment, I think, or third last. If you notice, there's a bunch more assignments coming up. In week 11, we have another assignment 4. It looks like this is a group assignment that you guys can work together. If you notice, that's around week 11. Assignment 5, week 12, where you have only a week to kind of hit that, and then assignment 6. So there's quite a few assignments going on. I'm going to try and break those out a little bit more, space them out a little bit, so that way you're not killed by one assignment after the other. Plus, from a marking perspective, it's going to get pretty hairy for me pretty soon if I don't get going on it, right? So we need to break that out a little bit. So the due dates might change, but the content for the course and the course schedule is going to stay on track. So again, by week 9, we should hit Java FX. We're not going to do a lot with Java FX. It's kind of neat. It's a different way of doing a UI, and especially from a web perspective. And then the big one, and I think always the more complicated one when we do stuff, is week 10 and 11, right? Weeks 10 and 11 is Java with database. To that's where it needs a couple of weeks. And if you notice, there's like a couple of chapters we're covering, chapter 11, as well as chapter 24, right? So we've kind of hit exception handling on a very high level already, right? So we probably won't go too much into that in chapter 11, just a bit of a review. But chapter 24 is where we start doing more database stuff with JDBC. So that's going to be around week 10, 11. So again, that's not changing. If we can get to it, and I'm putting it up there for you, if we can get to it. And depending on, we may space this out a little bit. I'd like to hit multi-threading and give it a good working, right? Like, you know, give you a good space of multi-threading and how to do that with Java. And that's great if we can get to it in week 12. I may have to space this out so it hits week 13 with Java collections. And again, Java collections, we've already kind of done, you know, a bit of collections with ArrayList, but I want to kind of hit generics and some other stuff by the time we hit week 13. So how do we space this out in terms of testing? So if I was to, for week 7, which is next week, what are we testing you on, right? A bit of chapter 12, which is the stuff we're going to talk about today, right? We're going to talk about polymorphism and inheritance for sure, and I'm hoping to get you a kind of an assignment started so you get some practice with inheritance and polymorphism in Java. But again, nothing new. It's like you've done this in C# before, so it's not like this is new concepts that you have to work on, right? So that you're going to be tested on those. We're going to be talking about stuff from chapter 8, which is object-oriented programming, a deeper look, and then also, if you notice, the rest, what we've already covered, right? So really, it's on this exam from multiple choice true false. You're getting a bit of chapter 12, 8, 9, and 10. Those 4 chapters, but a bit, not all of chapter 12, because I can't cover all of chapter 12 today. It's too much. It's like the PowerPoint slides, there's 250 PowerPoint slides, right? There's no way I can cover 250 PowerPoint slides, even in my best days, unless I'm like a maniac and like go blah, 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 and go really through faster. You're not going to get any value out of them. And not that I want to read the PowerPoint slides, but they are good pace to understand the book. So chapter 12 is kind of a thicker thing to understand. That's why we broke UI over a couple weeks, right? And that's why I can't really test all of it for you next week, just a bit. So mostly 8, 9, and 10 is what you need to study for next week's exam, right? You also need to do a bit of like I said, some kind of hands-on. So what would I give you for a hands-on, right? Something we've already covered. You'll probably get the hands-on, though. I'll be honest with you, it's going to cover everything until today. So anything I've asked you to do, console, inputs and outputs, all that kind of stuff that I've asked you to do, it's going to just test that you can do them without any help from anybody else, right? You will have access to Google. You will have full access to everything on the exam. You can use your own laptop, no problem. Everything is available to you. The only thing I'd ask you not to do is watch the videos, right, when you're on the exam. That would be bad, right? But otherwise, everything else is available to you. You know, your books and everything else, no problem. The only thing you can't do is you can't work on it with somebody else. So it's an individual exam. You're not pairing up with this one. And you can't ask other people for help because it's an exam. Okay, so that's what's going on next week. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to break it out over 2 sessions or over 1. If it's over 1 and there's only 2 hours, you're probably going to get like 20 minutes to do your multiple choice for true false, something like that, which means can't be many questions, right? And then the rest of the session will be your practical piece you have to hand in. So any questions around the schedule? Nothing's really changed. I just want to mention it because people have kind of shot messages to me saying, we're not really sure when the exam's happening. Nothing has changed. Just make sure which week you're in. Today, not week 7, right? Even though officially we've been together for 7 weeks, last week was a week off. So we don't count that. It's reading week, right? We don't count that week. Okay, administration done. We'll talk more about the assignment 3 if I can get to it later tonight. Let's bring up your Eclipse. So that's one thing I'd like you to try and do. So if I go to Eclipse, again, I'm using Luna. You can be using the later ones. It's fine. They're all very similar versions of Eclipse. We need to do a little bit of setup like we normally do. And again, I'm going to go with the same pattern that we normally do when we set up our lessons. Okay. So if you notice here, we've got COMP228 lesson 4 and 5, and there's a GUI test I was doing to make sure that this little platform can do everything I need to do, which it can. So let us create a new project. So let's do that together. So we're on a file, new Java project, and we're going to call this the same pattern. So COMP228 lesson 6. We're going to use these files as we move forward for UI. Okay, so let's click finish here, make it. And then again, what we do, just to reiterate for people who, who don't really get it yet 100% for whatever reason, when we do create a new project, what it is really a container for all of your files. All right, that's the difference between the way we do things with Microsoft, the way we do things with Java. In Visual Studio, you have a solution, right? In Java and specifically with Eclipse, you have a project, right? So there's some extraneous project files in addition to what we've been doing so far. So you notice there's the runtime library. Again, I'm using Java 8, and our source folder, which is where we're putting everything, right? Just a review. So this is the one I'm gonna kind of create here. I'm going to make a program class just as a driver to drive our code. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing as we did last time. So let's do that. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go new, and I'm going to do new class, and we're going to call this thing program. It's going to be inheriting Java Lang object, the object superclass, right? And I need to use the static main method. And by the way, you might be asked to do something like this. Create a driver class, like for your exam, right? Call it program using Eclipse. These are the steps, right? I've just done it for you, right? And then press finish, right? Boom, right? We've got our this is our stub or template, if you will, right? That's what this is. So it gives us kind of the driver class program, which is a static class where we're going to be testing the rest of our UI today. Okay. Let's do a couple things here. Let's get rid of the stub. Save. And now I want to add this into my GitHub. And I'm showing you GitHub every week because some people are still not great at GitHub for whatever reason, right? Some people have issues. There's 3 ways to do GitHub, right? 3 ways. First way is through the UI, right? So here in Eclipse, you can do it completely through the UI. The second way is through the desktop tool you can download from GitHub, right? The third way is strictly through command line, whatever you feel comfortable with, right? So one of those 3 ways got to work for you. They can't be, I don't know how to do GitHub. If you don't know how to do GitHub, you need to go on, learn a little bit of, go on a tutorial. There's tons of them out there that'll give you a quick 1-2. You can watch some of the videos I've done again, because I do them over and over again, the same stuff, right? Today I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to make it so that it's pure command line. So I'm not going to use the tool at the beginning. I'm just going to link to it, and I want to show you again the differences. So if you notice right now, how we know that it's part of a GitHub is if you notice over here with COMP228 lesson 4 and 5, we have this other little piece that says master. Where you see these things, that means that it's part of their GitHub repositories. Okay. All right, so let's check this out. So let's go into command line. Now again, if you're using a Mac or a Linux machine, it's going to look like this. For Windows, you're going to have command prompt, but really you have to navigate to where you're keeping your files. Okay, so remember, I had some trouble with that because of the way my machine is configured, but don't worry about me. So I'm going to go to courses, and I'm going to go to COMP228 Java Programming. I'm going to go to Workspace, and if I do a list, I got the wrong list, because if I do a path, my path is users Thomas courses COMP228, which is not right, right? I need to go to users Thomas courses for me, and this is just me. I'm just trying to find my path, COMP228, right? And then workspace. If I can type properly. Now that's wrong again. Right. Well, oh, that was right. Okay, good. So now if I have 3 directories, I have four folders in here. One is GUI test, the one I was fooling around with. I got lesson 6, which has a bit of a space into it for whatever reason. I just added a space by accident. How do I fix that? How do I fix a project? Can I rename my project? Anybody?
Right.
I could. Let's try it out. Let's, I like your thinking. Let's see if I can do that. So right click, and if I go refactor, rename, that's the way to do it, right? And I want to rename my project instead of COMP228 with a space and dash. I want to kind of name it with no spaces, just a dash. Press OK. I've renamed it. Now it shifts back to where it was. And then if I go back here and I do a list command, right, you notice it's changed on the operating system as well. I don't want to do a Git repository here in my workspace. That would be bad because that would include all my lessons that I have here. That would be bad. I want to go into the folder, so COMP228 lesson 6 as an example, and then do that Git repository, Git initialization there. So COMP228, and then lesson 6. Let me do it clear. So that's all I have. I've been in a source folder right now. And if I go into my source folder to show you, I'm going to go back out. I just got this program.java file because that's what it looks like in the operating system, right? Yours would be very similar on Windows. Okay, cool. And I would do a git init command. Git init initializes the repository for this workspace, right? Okay, so that's the first step. Step 2, git add dot, which means add everything into the repository, right? And if I look here, I only have my bin, so everything's added into the repository. Next, git commit, my first commit, right? M minus M means message. It's going to be commit. Now, if you don't have Git installed properly on your system, it'll give you an error. It'll say Git, I don't understand this command, right? You can use Git bash, which is part of the little package you get from downloading the desktop tool, right? And you can certainly change your environment variables on the Windows machines, so that way it'll see Git properly. But if you don't have command line access, or if Git is not installed properly on your machine, you'll get an error, right? Okay, but more or less it's going to be very similar to this. The command in Windows and in Mac, git init, git commit, git add, they're all the same. There's no difference in the commands. Right? Okay, good. Now I need to link it somehow with a repository that's remote. So I need to create my repository. So I'm going to go to Centennial here. And in Centennial, I'm going to create a new repository. And I'm going to call this COMP228, right? Lesson 6. And if you notice, it's asking me for a README file and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to say just create repository. And I'm going to get this URI, this path, but I'm also going to get these extra lines of code that I can use in the command line. By the way, these lines of code work on Windows, Mac, Linux. It's cross-platform, as long as you have Git installed. Okay, so I'm going to just grab this line here, which gives me I'm adding a remote, which is my remote files. And I'm going to paste it here in my command line. Once I do that, I can then push it. So I'm going to say git push -u origin master. Everything goes well. I'm pushing my files, which there's not a lot of files right now. It's just like one little program.java file onto Git. And take a look. It gives you the instructions when you create a repository, what to do. Here are all the commands you need. If you follow these commands at the very minimum, you'll be able to do it on command line. So it's not like they're hidden or you don't know where to find them. Once you create a repository on GitHub, you get the command line. All right. Let us refresh to see what it looks like now. And if you notice, I do have a project file, a class path, a source, a bin, a settings file, and so on. These are all the things that have been added into my repository. Let's add a README file. I'm going to add a README file that's remote. And I've done this before in different ways, but I'll do it again. I'll say it's Java programming, repo for Java programming. For Java programming, I'll say lesson 6, do a little differently, at Centennial College. Okay. and I'll say exploring GUI programming. So we're going to do, and we'll make this, notice the hashtag here, that's like, if you ever do any web programming, that's like an H1 tag equivalent. This is markdown as opposed to markup. If I use 2 hashtags, that means it's an H2, right? So it's going to be like a secondary heading when you do your README file. And if I click commit new file, I get a bit of a thing like this, right? What kind of gives you an example, some kind of indication of what this repo is for. Okay, I've got a README file, which that means I'm one commit ahead. I have 2 commits online, but yet in my command line structure, I only have 1 commit. If I do a git log command, I see that there's only 1 commit, the initial commit here locally, but I've got 2 commits remotely. So I've got to sync that up. And the way to do that, of course, is to do a git pull, right? Git pull pulls down I do a list. I notice that I have a README file, my bin, and my source. They're there as part of my structure. You won't see the README file, or you may not see the README file in Eclipse. If I go back to Eclipse, and if I look at lesson 6, right? Here it is. Do I see the README file? The other question to ask yourself is, can I refresh somehow? Because sometimes what happens is in Eclipse, there it is. If in Eclipse, if I don't refresh, right? If I don't refresh, then I don't know that I'm using that I have extra files or other things that are hidden here. By the way, let me just get rid of this GUI test because we'll do it together. So the way to get rid of a project is not only to click it. If you want to completely get rid of it, you have to click delete project contents or on disk. Cannot be undone. You want to do this in order for us to get rid of all the files on the operating system. If you don't do that, then there'll be some remnants, some other files. I don't want this one, so I just want to get rid of it. Now it's gone. So all I have is COMP228 lesson 6. But hey, how come it doesn't know, just like up here, lesson 4 and 5 knows that this is a repository, but lesson 6, even though I've got it here locally, I know it's a repository, I've got a GitHub repository, I've connected it remotely on the command line, but here in the tool, it doesn't know. Well, yeah, it wouldn't know, right? It wouldn't know because we've done everything through the command line, right? There isn't an automatic way of knowing. Microsoft, on the other hand, if you use Visual Studio, it knows. As soon as there's a Git repository is created in the command line, if you were to do the same way with Microsoft, for a solution for Microsoft, it would know that there's a Git repository. It doesn't know here, all right? IntelliJ does it as well, and so does even NetBeans, right? They're all very good. Eclipse is not connected. If I want to know that it's done, well, I got to do the same kind of thing, right? I got to right-click on my solution, my project. I'm going to go down to team, and I'm going to go share project. When I do that, I'm going to say git next, right? And I'm not going to click anything. I'm just pointing at my repository here, right? Here it is, right? It looks, I can see it says user create repository in parent folder of the project. Well, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to even create a new one. I just want to basically just point at the one that I have, right? So this is the path that I have. If I go this, it'll create a new repository, right? Use or create a new repository in my project. Well, I don't want that because look, my project is COMP228 lesson 6, and my location is users, Thomas, courses, blah, blah, blah. That's the one I want, right? This is the one I want right here. So I don't want to create a new repository. So using this, a repository in parent isn't good, right? I want to do this, right? I don't want to create. What about if I select? So let's take a look. Well, if it was here, right? If it was a repository that Eclipse knows about, I could have selected it, right? Because it keeps track, my working folder, my workspace knows about all the repositories, my Git repositories. There's an actual file that keeps track of them all, right? But here I don't know, right? So if it looks like there's no working folder selected. Here's the path within the repository. I mean, I can certainly choose the path within my repository to understand what it is, right? But that's not going to help. I mean, there is no help feature function to get me to do it, right? If I click create, that would be bad too, because all it's going to do is try and create a new file. Let's try and mess this up. Okay, we're going to mess it up. All right, so I want to show you how to do this because this might cause a problem. If I click create like we normally do, right? So I'm not using the parent directory, and I'm clicking on my folder COMP228 lesson 6, and I click create here. Okay, it's going going to ask me where. I'm going to have to kind of point to where I want to look at. So I'm going to go to courses, COMP228. You know, I'm going to go back to workspace and look at this workspace. And then I'm going to press open, right? This is the workspace. And look, it says directory users Java programming is not empty, right? This is the error I'm getting. I'll press finish. And it says, well, cannot move project. And then it already exists. Well, guess what I got? Well, even when I do that, I'm trying to make a mistake, right? But even when I've done that, what it does, it says, no. You already have a Git repository there, right? So it knows. So now, inadvertently, I've registered my Git repository with Eclipse, and it knows just by doing this step. I haven't done a finish. I can't create a new one because it already exists. It gives me an error here. If I click cancel, all of a sudden here, I do have the ability for me to know that I see the same structure that I do with the other projects, right? Okay, let me do one more thing here because I've added this structure just to prove that this works, right? Because all I've done it on command line, I've initialized it there, and now I'm taking it into Eclipse and using it from there. And let's see what it does. So in my project structure, my program command, so it's going to be system.out print line, or it's going to say testing Git. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, and if I don't make any spelling mistakes, typing mistakes, which I just have, then this thing, I've made a change. Now, when I make a change, this greater than sign pops up next to Eclipse on the project, right, for people who haven't seen this before. And a greater than sign pops up next to the default package, and a greater than sign pops up next to the program.java file because that's the one that's changed. Okay, cool. Now, if I right-click on my project, and I go to Team, and I go to Commit, I can make some changes here like I normally can. I need also to include my gitignore file, which I didn't have before. And now in my commit message, I'm going to say something like updated program.java. So that's what I really have done. Push. And if you notice, I don't have to put any details in there like I normally do because my local repository has all the smarts. What's my remote? All that kind of stuff is built in. I've already done all that work. Eclipse just knows about it. So now that I've done that, if I go back online and if I refresh, you can see that I'm going to get this next commit happening, right? There it is. There's my updated program Java. This came right out of Eclipse, right? It didn't come from a command line. And if I go back to my command line here, and if I press, kind of a list, nothing looks different. But if I do a git log, it's going to show me 3 commits now. My initial commit, right, which is here. My creating of the README file, which is here, which I did both in command line. And then my updated program Java through Eclipse. So all those 3 things. So you see they link together. You just got to kick Eclipse into an understanding that there's a Git repository already there. That's all it is, right? Once you've done that, your Git is good. Why am I showing you this yet again? Because people keep sending me messages saying, Tom, I don't understand. I don't know where my Git repository is. I've tried. I just can't get it working. Can I just send you these files? Please don't send me your files in email. That would be bad, right? I'm going to ignore them. I'm not going to accept it as a submission. Please use eCentennial for your submissions. I don't want to see anything emailed to me. I don't want you to give me the path. I need you to go do things the right way. Create a repository on Git, and then give me the link to Git, plus probably a good example for your submissions for assignment 1 and 2, because I haven't marked them yet, is you should probably zip up your project files and pop them onto eCentennial, so that way, as a backup, just in case somehow you can't get Eclipse working with Git, or you can't do it with command line, or you can't do it with a tool, 3 ways of doing it, right? Then at least I have a backup. I can still look at your files. I can still give you marks, right? Please don't omit one or the other or both. Otherwise, if I've got no files accessible to me, I can't do anything for you. And the worst is, and this is what I've received in the past from you guys, by the way. I'm not going to say who, right? I've received a zip file that I can't open and a Git repository that's empty. What can I do for someone like that? Nothing. I want to help, but I can't, right? So please check to see that your Git repository is got something in it. The path that you sent me, the link that you sent me has got something in it, right? And that your folders up on eCentennial, they work. If you download them, unzip them, they actually unzip, and you can look at them, right? If they don't unzip or there's a problem for you, there's going to be a problem for me. And please don't use RAR or some other compression format, because I may or may not be able to open it like you. All right? That may be a problem. So any questions around this? Just again, I'm hitting administration for a second because I know people have sent me issues, and we're kind of almost halfway through the semester, and I don't want to get to the point where I'm marking and I'm like, I can't access your files. That would be very bad, right? Please don't let that happen. Okay, no questions. That's great. It's fantastic. Everyone knows how to do this perfectly, I guess, right? Which is never the case, of course. But anyways, I'm trying to help you guys out, okay? You need to get onto this developer track here, guys. Okay, so we've got this piece in here. Let me just go through the Java tools that are built in, or the Java building blocks of UI that are built into Eclipse. And every IDE has something like this. If you look on the left-hand side here, you should see a couple of little pull-down menus. I don't know if you can see this. One of them is the new projects, new classes, new interfaces, all that stuff menu. Yeah? And there's another one that's next to it. You see that one? Another one next to it that shows you swing. Does everyone have that? Go look. Do you have that? Who does not have that? Put up your hand. You don't have it. All right. Why don't you have it? Because this is a module. That's why, right? It's a module that comes with Eclipse. But if you notice what I have here, I can add in different swing components, SWT components, which is heavier component, JFace, different Eclipse forms, if I want to put in different things here, data binding, and swing, right? Now, so how do I get that? And that's the first thing you need to ask. If I add a swing component, so I want to add a J-frame, right? Or I want to add a J-panel, right? Or something like that. By the way, this is the different structures we're going to be talking about over the course of the next couple of weeks, right? That we're together. So one of them is Java GUI components, right? One of them is the J-frame. J-frame is almost like your outer container. So if I click J-frame, and it's going to ask me to create a J-frame, I need to get a name for the J-frame. It's going to add it in to the default package. I'm just going to show you what this works, and then we're going to go back and find the way of doing this, all right? So I'm going to call this J-frame, we're going to call it an example frame, right? Who has these components, by the way? Does anyone have the components that I have? Yay, one person, two person. You have the components too?
There's a swing. None of them.
You have the swing, right? Yeah, okay. So who has the swing components as part of their package? You have a couple of people. Anyone not have the swing components? A lot of people. So you don't have anything. You have nothing. No, nothing there at all. Might be part of your perspective. You may want to check to make sure that the Java perspective is the one that you have active, right? Okay. So if you have this, I'm going to call this example frame. Then it says use advanced templates to generate JFrame. I'll leave that clicked on, and then we'll unclick it later to see what the difference is. Again, this is just a generator, right? It's a scaffold for us to build out the JFrame. You could also do this by hand, which we're going to learn how to do today. So whether you have these extra components in your Eclipse, or if you're not using Eclipse, you're using some other IDE, which is totally fine. If you want to use IntelliJ, you want to use NetBeans, doesn't matter to me, right? As long as I get your Java files, I can always recreate your project, right? Let's go finish. And what it does is, if you notice, it creates another class called exampleframe.java, right? It imports certain things. It imports something called a board layout, an event queue, and a JFrame, and a JPanel, and other things. These are all the extra imports you get just from what I just did, right? And then, if you notice, here's my my JPanel and my static main. Oh, look at this. I've got another static main class right here. Do I really need this one? Right? I've already got a static main, so why would it have another static main, right, that I want to have it? Here's my public example frame. It's almost like my example frame itself, right, is a, it's almost like using a driver built in, right, if you notice what it is. So here's my JFrame, and I'm creating a new public class example frame. That's what I've called it, which extends the JFrame superclass, right, which we're going to talk about. And then I also declare a private JPanel component. Don't worry about this right now. I'm just showing you how it looks. We can review the code together, right? And then where it says launch the application, right? What it's doing is it's creating a new runnable. This is kind of weird, right? Because when I do a new runnable, it's almost like a new thread. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then what it has in a try catch, it's going to try and instantiate a new object of type example frame, which is instantiating an object of itself. Right? This is why it's complex to do these things. I'm just showing you this kind of stuff. If you notice, example frame is a method. Here's my method, public example frame. And all I'm doing here is setting the close operation, the set bounds. I'm setting my content pane to a new JPanel, which we're going to talk about that, what's required. I'm creating my set pane, my content pane with a border and a layout, and then I'm going to set the content pane. I'm using the set content pane method, to target content pane, this new object of type JPanel. Whew. Don't worry if you don't understand any of this, because it's a mess when you do it the wrong way. Okay, so this class is what I'm saying, this example frame class. So now if I wanted to run this one, so this, I'm running example frame.java, not program.java. This is my stub. Here's example frame.java that I've made. And if I press play, it's going to ask me to do a couple things, right? It's going to say, hey, look, here's my frame. And this is what you get. You get this little window that pops up that looks like almost like any other window that you've ever seen. And if you did it on the PC, you would see a PC type window, right? A Windows type pop-up window that looks something like this. I'm just getting the Mac version here with the Mac buttons. You'll get the Windows buttons on the right side, right? Which is the close and the maximize, the minimize, right? So that's all that I get, right, when I use this pane. And I've done it without invoking it from my program.java class. If you look at my program.java class, I'll open that up. And if I press play here, right, so debug here, all I'm going to get is testing git in the command line, right? Here's my command line. So I can run or I can test each individual Java program by clicking onto it and clicking the debug button. One right now is not linked to the other. And in fact, this example frame.java does not require a driver because it has a built-in, just to show you again, a built-in static main class, right, that is driving everything by using this example frame method that's been written right down here, right, to create my window. So how do I combine these? What if I don't want to use the my extra driver class? How can I do it in my program file? Well, all these imports, that's the first thing I need. All these imports right here, pretty much, border layout, event queue, and event queue actually allows us to use things like buttons and so on. I need all this stuff, right? But what if I don't know I need it? So let's start typing off. I need a JPanel and a JFrame, right? Those are the two things I need. Because remember, when I instantiate an object, right? If I say my new frame, here's my frame. This is interesting. My new frame is a new of type example frame. And if you notice example frame, I have a constructor. This is the method that I'm using here. It's just a constructor, right, of the example frame class, right? And that's being invoked by itself. So how do I kill this piece, but still invoke it from my program.java class? Anyone have an idea? Look at the code for a second, okay? Just look up here, right? So here's my example.java frame class that I made. Example frame, I called it, which extends JFrame. Okay. When I'm inheriting, this is inheritance again. I'm inheriting the superclass that I'm getting from JFrame, right? All the stuff from JFrame that I'm getting, which is built into Java. Now JFrame, the only way I can get access to it if I use this import javax.swing. This package, it's in the javax.swing package, and I'm using this. That's how I'm importing it to do this. So I'm importing all the different details. So what if, right, example frame constructor, right, but not within its own class? How can I call it in my program.java class? Anybody? I create an instance, just like normal. So let's do a couple things. Let's do this. So and again, I'll get back to this in a second. If you don't have the tools that I just used, don't worry. We're going to get back to this and do it by hand in a second. Okay, so my JPanel I need, right, because my JPanel is going to be used in my constructor, and that's, if you notice, JPanel instance. So if I'm really recreating this program from my best practices, my conventions, I need to rename my content panel to underscore content panel, because you know what? My content panel is private, and I want to show the world when you, if you're all, you should all know that anything with an underscore is private, right? That's my convention that I'm using. You might use something else. So let's refactor rename this one. So I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go to refactor rename. I'm going to change content pane to underscore content pane. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Well, down here, if you notice, all of this gets renamed, right? Inside my example frame constructor. And let me just rename this so you can see this. This is my constructor, right? That's what this is. Don't be alarmed when you see this. All right, this is my constructor. I don't need this static main. In a second, you'll see why. I'm going to do this. Example frame is equal to new example frame. I'm going to do this here in my program, my driver class. That's what I want to do, right? So let's do that. Let's just move this away. And by the way, I need this also, this frame.set visible is true. So if I don't have that, then it won't work. So I'm going to take these two pieces and copy them out and move them into my program file and put them here. By the way, we're going to have issues in a second. You're going to see why. So let's just do that. My example frame, if now that I've removed those pieces, I don't need this static class anymore. So I'm going to get rid of it just by doing one of these, the static main method. So that's gone. I do need my private JPanel instance variable, and that's what private instance variable is, just like normal. So private instance variable, that's where I have them in there, variables. And one thing I'd like to use is the keyword this, because it's not being used here. And I like to be explicit when I use my instance variable. So I'm going to use the keyword this here. So I'm just going to replace this in front. You don't have to use it. I use it because it's clarity for me. It clarifies which object I'm using. And you guys should be very comfortable with using the keyword this at this point. Okay, so that's what all I've done is restructure my class. By the way, in 2 seconds, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. Don't worry if you can't follow along. Even if you don't, that I just used to create my JPanel and my JFrame, don't worry, it'll be up on GitHub in a few minutes. Right, so you'll be able to follow along regardless if you have the tools that I have. Okay, so this is part one. Part two is I've got to make sure that, I'm going to save this thing. Part two is I'm going to make sure that the program.java class, and if you notice, I'm not getting an error. How come? It's in the same package, right? Because my example frame class and my program.java driver class is in the same package, which is the default package right now. I have access to the example frame custom class I just made, right? I can access it. It knows what it is, right? So I've created an object called frame, right? That's the object of the class. And it's equal to a new example frame. I've done this in one line, right? I could break this out a little differently, right? For example, I could make example frame, right, a static member. I could do that. But let's just leave. Then I'm using my frame object and setting visibility to the frame itself. You need to use this set visible as true, or else the actual window won't open up. You won't see it. Okay, let's see this in action, if I'm right. So I'm going to go to my program.java class and press play. When I do that, bam, you get your frame, just like before. So now what I've done is I'm using my program, my driver class. This is my driver class, which is a static, it uses a static main, right? I only need to do it there to launch or control my example frame. Here's something. If you notice something else, when I create an example frame class that's based off of this, with a border layout and a JFrame and everything else, it's interesting enough that I've got, this is part of the design tools that you get with Eclipse. On the bottom, there's two. There's source. There's two tabs here, if you notice. There's a source tab and there's a design tab, right? Take a look. If I click on the design tab, what I get. So I click on the design tab and I get this. I actually get a drag and drop window, right? That I can see what my frame is going to look like here. So I get a drag and droppable environment now that I didn't have before. If you notice on the left, I have my components that are part of my JFrame. Here's my JFrame, and I've got something called a content pane, right? My content pane has a border layout. That's the border layout that's been assigned to it. If you notice, there's these little control handles that come up that show you that my content pane is the exact size of my window. Okay? I also have in my outliner, on the right, here's my outline, right? I have the content pane, which shows as an object of type JPanel. Okay. Content pane. Example frame. So we're looking at two things, two components, two main components we're looking at here. A JFrame and a JPanel. The JPanel is where we put all of our content. The JFrame itself is the window that pops up, right? I can't put content, like slap it right into a JFrame. It won't work properly. You'll get errors. Something else we didn't do. I didn't create any kind of, in my program.java file, I didn't have any kind of exception handling here. We did have the exception handling piece built in to when I created my example frame code. How about from a nomenclature perspective? If I go back to source, right? And if I look at how things are named, I've called my JPanel a content pane. And that's okay. I can name this thing. I could also call this the content panel, just so that we know what this thing means, right? An idea that you know it's a JPanel. So let's kind of refactor, rename that. So we kind of go with our thinking because we're still learning, all right? So kind of double click here and highlight everything. I'm gonna go back to refactor, rename, and rename this thing to content panel, right? So we know it's a JPanel. Just as a mnemonic, right? A way of remembering. Okay, cool. Going back to program Java, we've created our first panel. Let me update this for you, and I'll do this within Java this time, right? So I'm going to file save all right, if I can. If I don't have to, that means things are already saved. I'm going to go back to my project. I'm going to go to team. I'm going to go to commit. And now it's going to ask me for what I want to add. And if you notice on my status, I have to click on exampleframe.java, which is the new thing I've added. Let me click this on. Now I'm able to use a commit message and saying something like added JFrame class. Right? That's what I really did. It's a JFrame class called example frame. Okay, and I'm going to commit and push. All right, so if everything goes well, for those people who are lagging behind and you can't follow along because you don't have the tools, you can certainly go up and refresh, and you're going to see that inside my source folder, there are two Java classes, my example frame.java and my program.java. Are we good? Did you understand did someone not understand what I just did, right? All I've done is use the built-in tools. So what are these built-in tools that I use? And for people who don't have them, how do I get them, right? Because they're very useful, as you can see, because they kind of create some simple ways of doing things. Well, Eclipse has something called Window Builder, right? So Window Builder. Here's my Eclipse Window Builder, right? Eclipse Window Builder, right? If you notice, it's built in to Eclipse, right? So people who can't see it, there's a reason why it's not showing up, right? So it says Home Projects Window Builder is the one that they've added. If you don't have it, you can always download it as part of your distribution. So look at what you get with it. You get this same stuff that I got if you're using Eclipse, right? The Window Builder. So let's try it out. So let's see if you can get this thing. So I'm going to go download for the Eclipse distribution. Of course, what is it going to give us? It's going to give us some links to how to get to it, right? And where we really want to go is, if you notice, here's my installing Window Builder Pro. Now again, some of this is not free, but it says instructions and system requirements for installing Window Builder can be found here. Here's my update sites for different for Mars or Luna or whatever version that you're using. And here's the link for the update site that I want to go to, right? But let's check to see, just from a provisioning perspective, how do I add this in? If shouldn't you already have it? So let's put that in. So let's say Windows Builder not showing up, right? Not showing. Window Builder not showing just as a thing. How do I set that up? If I go to Preferences, right? Here's preferences. And that's not really it. That's because that's Window Builder Pro, right? And here's my Eclipse community where it says Window Builder Design tab not showing. There we go. I've got all these things going on, but my design tab's not showing. How come, right? And what do you do to add this in, right? And if you notice some of the questions says like, this is my code, and then how come I can't make this work, right? And if it goes, thanks, I've uploaded the code. The reason I don't bother to upload it in the first place, and so on. This gives some updates, and it talks about how to generate this stuff. But this isn't really the answer, right? Because really, that's the piece you guys are missing. Eclipse Luna, right? Window Builder installed, right? Here's one, but not appearing in use in the Select Wizard menu, right? And there's one answer. It says, you know, you have to go to Select Wizard menu and select SWT JFace project, and you should be able to use Window Builder, right? So let's try that. Let's go into our Eclipse. And again, I've got the Java perspective in here. Notice I have other options for perspectives. I can choose something else. For example, if I want to program an Android or something else, I can probably do it here as well. But how come? I mean, I don't have that. I mean, you know, you guys should all have it if it's installed properly. And here, by the way, how do I check to see what modules I have installed by default with Eclipse anyway, right? So let's take a look. So I'm going to go to Eclipse, Preferences, and if I look through here and I see Window Builder, do you guys see Window Builder in Preferences? Take a look at your Eclipse, please. Swing and SWT, right? Both those two things, I have both of them in there, right? Window Builder. By the way, I didn't do anything special to get this Window Builder thing here. It's built into my Java, right? My Eclipse. So here's a great thing to do, right? While we're waiting. I'm going to do this over the break. I'm going to download a new version of Eclipse, and we'll do it from scratch. So I'm going to download Eclipse, because that's the way to show you how to do this. I'm going to go to Eclipse Downloads. And if you notice, the one I'm going to get is not for EE developers. If you get this one, it's wrong, right? Just saying. If you go Eclipse for Java developers, this one's the right one, right? You can choose your operating system. Mine's Mac, and I'm going to choose 64-bit, right? And so this is the latest version, right? And it tells me where I'm getting download from, someplace here close. And it says eclipse.java.mars. So instead of Luna, it's going to be Mars now. And I'm going to download. I've done everything correctly. It's asking me for a donation, but I'm going to kind of download it here in my downloads. And I'll let it resolve. It's going to take a bit of time. It says 1 minute, and it's 165 megabytes. Now, I can launch, and I can have multiple versions of Eclipse installed in my system. I don't have to go with just the one that's built in. So we're going to do it from scratch, just in case people have issues. So I want to show you that I haven't done anything different or neat or changing or whatever. And we'll add this in just as if we're doing it from the very first time. So for now, because we're hitting about 11:30, which is about halfway through, right? Let us take a brief break while this is downloading, right? We'll go 5 or 10 minutes. We'll come back, and we'll get into this thing again, okay?